Welcome back.
Thank you.
You know, democracy seems to be a wonderful thing in theory. And the United States has decided that they want to export democracy all around the world. We're fighting wars over that in certain countries, and we talk about that all the time. But I wonder if democracy really is what it all is cracked up to be based on what's going on within the United States. You might say to yourself, what am I talking about? Well, we're going to talk about that now, and we're going to talk about some of the things that are going on to kind of curtail democracy, the whole idea of one man and one vote. And I want to have Lori kind of bring us into that conversation. Let's talk about some of the things that are going on, and especially are important to the 2012 elections.
There's actually a few things going on. Some of it entails the redistricting, where they're actually doing what is perceived, what appears to be the dilution of the votes for people in the so-called minority communities. And this has been going on for years, but I guess we should first start out by explaining what that's all about. Redistricting occurs every 10 years after they do the census, and the idea is supposed to be that people are able to vote for the people that they think will best represent them as the constituency. And the issue is that we have situations now where various states are trying to redraw the lines, and they're redrawing the lines in a way that may actually negatively affect some of the minority voters.
Like Texas, for example.
Like Texas, for example. And it's interesting that Rick Perry, Governor Rick Perry, is in that, in the forefront of that situation, because what Texas is trying to do is being fought by the Department of Justice, President Obama and the Department of Justice, because they are, in fact, they just came down with a decision where they said that they are going to prevent them from following through with the law that they tried to do in redistricting until they can actually put it in the court system, the federal court system, and put it on trial. But in addition to that, they also are trying to make this law about people having to have IDs, which will also negatively affect a lot of the people in the poorer communities, or the disadvantaged communities, because a lot of them don't have government-issued IDs, which cost money. So there's a variety of things. Oh, and the last thing is they're actually trying to make sure that some of these voter registration drives are hampered, where they used to have 10 days to get some of the paperwork in. Now they're trying to just give them 2 days. But the worst part about that is it's not just that you have 2 days or you don't get to, put in the voting information. You actually get fined. So they are discouraging a lot of the groups who have been doing this over an extended period of time.
And that's going on in Florida right now.
Yeah, and that's going on in Florida.
What do you think about all of this, Bert?
Well, I think, and I have considered for the past, since Obama got elected, that it evoked a sort of a hate response from groups that can hardly contain themselves now. The terrible, worst thing to them was that if he got elected in the first place. The next worst thing, or if not even worse, would be if he's reelected. So they want to make sure they put up every obstruction, every block, every kind of obstacle in the way to prevent the type of voters that they think he will get, or he had in 2008, from voting. That's blacks, Hispanics, youth, and the poor. You put all those groups together, and they are trying to marginalize them and make it so difficult for them what Lori pointed out were important tactical measures they're using. But their overall strategic approach is to, nationwide, diminish the role of the Obama-type voter.
With, with the idea of voter fraud out there, do you think that there should be a legitimate concern about making sure that the votes are actually being cast by the people that say they're voting?
Yeah, I think you should, but you have to also recognize, you have to weigh the situation, and if there had been widespread voter fraud, there'd be another thing. But if you weigh that against the potential of diluting the vote to the point that a lot of people who are, affected financially because they can't get this government issue ID, cannot vote. That, I think, might be more important than a small version of the fraud. And as Bert mentioned, it's a tactic. Because if you put all of these things together, the dilution of the vote, through the redistricting, the situation with the ID, the other thing that they're coming up with is trying to prevent people from being able to vote early on that Sunday before Election Day, because they recognize that a lot of churches went on drives to make sure that their congregation were able to vote, and all of that should be a problem for everybody. Because if you, like you said, if we're looking at democracy and the mere fact that you want one person, one vote, you shouldn't be trying to discourage any group of people from being able to contribute to the process.
Let me ask a question, Burton. I mean, I don't know really a lot about the whole idea of voter fraud, but it seems to me the percentage of people that they're talking about that would be committing voter fraud would be less likely to be the number of people they would disenfranchise by putting these laws into effect. Mm-hmm. Does that seem to make sense to you?
Yeah. The Bush administration spent 5 years studying this problem, trying to check, to see for voter fraud. Couldn't find anything significant. 5 years. But interestingly, you asked a question a few minutes ago regarding about how you feel about this. Mm-hmm. They've done polls with the very people who are affected, with the blacks, young people, and the population in general, the people who mostly affected, plus the population in general. And most people say, yeah, when you first approach them with that question, do you think there should be identification of everyone should have be identified and have a documentation who wants to vote, but who may be fraudulent? And they say yes. The majority of them agree with the Republicans not realizing the full understanding of what the basic problem is.
I think the part of the problem was it explained to them what the outcome.
Many of them, when they explained to them later,
right.
They, oh no. Then they, but at first blush, that was their response.
When you look at some of these partisan think tanks, Lori, have they projected any number of people how many people do they think are going to be affected by these voter IDs and be disenfranchised?
Well, I don't know what the percentage is, but they do believe it's going to be quite a large percentage, because they already know that quite a large group of people don't have these government issue IDs. And it's ironic because I remember hearing just recently somebody talking about the cost of these IDs, and a lot of people don't have them. They don't have, I mean, they probably would have it if it didn't have the cost associated with it. But it's it's time and effort and money, and if they can't get that, it's one thing not to have it because you don't have ID if the police stop you, or if you don't have ID if you go to a place where you're supposed to have that government type. But if you're preventing a process as important as voting, then I think that's a major issue.
Well, I think that some of the conservative estimates is somewhere between 5 million people being disenfranchised through the whole process. Right. So I think that when you look at the percentage of people they say that are committing fraud versus the number of people that be disenfranchised, you would think you would want to be very careful, especially after the amount of people that had to die and had to suffer just to have the right to vote. Mm-hmm. But again, here we go. It's our own fault. And it's our own fault because a lot of us didn't go out and do what? We didn't go out and vote. A lot of these laws, a lot of these things couldn't be put into place unless the Republicans had control of these legislatures. Exactly. And they do have control of them. Right. So this shows you when you want to sit your lazy behind up there and you don't want to educate yourself. And I said lazy because I'm annoyed now. Mm-hmm. Because now we're looking at the bigger picture. And if you think you don't like Obama, just imagine when the Republicans get in office. And I'm going to say that because I remember how things were underneath Reagan. And I don't think people would go back to that crap.
Yeah, I find it interesting that there's a pattern, not just going against President Obama since he's been in office, but there seems to be a pattern with these states, whether it's California with the Medicare situation or it's Texas now, where everybody's rushing to do stuff without prior approval.
And Florida.
And Florida, where people say, well, okay, we'll make the effort, and then, no, we can't wait. Let's just go ahead and pass this bill, or let's go ahead and do this, where now we have to go into the court system where the federal court has to prevent them. It just seems, It seems like it's going against what our government is supposed to, our government process is supposed to be.
We see. I think the problem, Bert, is this: we're not asking the intelligent question. Why is it so important to keep you from voting? If it's that important to keep you from doing it, it must mean it's worth something. I mean, do people even understand how this whole system works? One man, one vote.
One man, one vote.